And while you're moving, I will quasi-introduce David, who, of all the people that we're having this semester, is the one who least needs an introduction. And he, as you all know, is the editor-in-chief of the New Yorker, although I think it's called just editor, David, yeah. And what we're going to do is have a conversation, and in the conversation, I'm going to ask him some things that would ordinarily be part of the introduction, so I won't go into detail about him, but he has written Pulitzer Prize-winning books. He came to his job at the New Yorker by way of the Washington Post, where he was a distinguished journalist, and his areas of expertise go from prize fighting, which I share this addiction and vice with him, to the former Soviet Union and Russia. And so as I will say when we're sitting over there, but I'll say it up here anyway, somehow he writes regularly for the magazine. There is a rumor that he has just completed a book on Obama, which we'll ask him about. He has spoken here as a Delacorte lecturer once before, and if I remember correctly, he claimed to have read everything that goes into the magazine every week before it goes into the magazine. So I want to know, and he's got a family who haven't deserted him yet. So I want to know how he does all that. But anyway, we're very grateful that you're joining us today, David. So welcome.
I'm glad you're sitting to my left, Victor.
Good. Okay.
I got that out of the way.
Good. Okay. Well, since you got that out of the way, I will share with folks who are here that I got an email from David yesterday. I didn't see it till this morning, asking me what I was going to ask him, if there are any questions that he should bone up on. So my first question is there an ethical problem for the writer to share with the subject, or a practical problem with the subject of an interview, the questions in advance, or should you be more spontaneous than that?
Well, you didn't really tell me, so no, there's not. There's not. I think you get in the room the way you can get in the room. You're talking about a real interview in a journalistic setting?
Yes.
I think the compromises one makes, the behavior one occasionally has, is not something that you would want to be shown on broadcast television all the time.
Right. Okay. Good. So I answered.
So I don't want to be too dainty about it.
Okay.
Have I ever called and said, I want to ask you about X, Y, and Z? Sure.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Good. Good. So what we're going to do is we'll have a couple more of these, but my hope is that I will start the conversation, but that it will quickly branch out into your joining the conversation. And we have microphones on both sides, so you can line up and ask, take advantage, exploit, apply, whatever, to David. So in David Letterman fashion, since this is big for us, we're videotaping this, I have a list of 10 questions to ask you.
Okay.
Okay?
And you're gonna ask them right in a row?
Pardon me?
You're gonna ask all 10 right in a row?
No, I'm going to do it one by one.
Excellent.
I'm not going to.
Okay.
I'm not going to.
Because I can't remember where my keys are.
I wouldn't impose that on you, and I even made notes on some of them. So, in my other life, one of the things that I do is I consult with this organization called the PEJ, which is the Project on Excellence in Journalism. And they do every year a report on journalism, and I get to read their report on magazines before it goes to press. And I just finished reading their report, and this is off the record and unpublic, blah, 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 and of course we're going to put it on our website tomorrow, so I'm probably violating some rule by
And it's a camera.
telling you what's in it, but I want to tell you what's in this, a little bit of what's in this report and get your comments on it. According to their report, as 2010 began, two what they call existential questions hung over the American magazine industry. One, whether there is a future for the mass market magazine anymore, and two, to what degree advertising, which makes up the lion's share of magazine revenue in the United States, will continue to support the industry. Two simple, large.
Well, they're the same question in a sense. Yeah. In a sense, they're the same question. Should I answer it as purely in New Yorker terms or overall in terms of the magazine business? Because I can answer one better than the other.
Well, we're going to get to the New Yorker, but
okay.
You can answer it any way you want. It's a free country. And
I think that only an extremely naive editor or publisher had these questions occur to him this year. That it should have occurred to any reasonable editor or publisher with the advent of the internet and the development of the internet, that these were going to be existential questions, really very serious questions. Because how is a magazine's economics structured? I can tell you from the New Yorker point of view that even though we reap a lot of benefit by the fact that people subscribe to the magazine and some even buy it on the newsstand, that the lion's share of revenue for the New Yorker and for other magazines it's even more, is advertising.
Yes.
And right now, and this is it's not as if it had been that way since ancient Babylonia, and all of a sudden we have a crisis now, that every piece of printed matter, all journalism, with some exceptions of some opinion magazines and foundation-run things, has this innate problem because of what's going on in the advertising business. What's going on in the advertising business is that advertisers are suddenly agape and confused and thrilled with what they see as their possibilities in this ever-expanding media world, electronic media world. What are their possibilities? So in the old days, the formula was very pure, very easy, very simple. You will give us X dollars to, with ink, take up a page and attract your customers to your product. How did the advertiser know that this was doing any good or bringing any customers to the store or the car or the fur coat or the diamond bracelet or whatever it was? They kind of didn't. They kind of didn't. They could guess, they could take surveys, but it was not scientific. What the internet offers is the lure of the scientific, right, the notion that they can quantify exactly what the relationship is between the customer and the ad itself. Now, as you all know, on the other hand, internet advertising is so diffuse that it's not quite clear what good it does for the advertiser, and it certainly doesn't reap the benefits for websites that advertising did for traditional print pre-internet. So advertising everywhere has gone down, whether it's the New York Times or the Washington Post or the entire magazine business. And this sense of crisis, this sense of, your words, existential crisis, has been hastened by a confluence of factors. A gigantic recession. When do people advertise? When they're putting out new stuff. Nobody puts new stuff out in the midst of a recession. It's very rare. So that impacted advertising. It deepened the crisis. It deepened the sense of immediacy. And there's this technological, I wouldn't call it a crisis because it's full of possibility too, and full of journalistic possibility and wonders, and something we can discuss as we go forward. But you have to have been thinking about this for a good while if you were smart. But the question about what to do is much, much more complex.
Okay, but I'm sure in last year's report, I don't remember, they said the
They
same
said the
thing.
same thing, I'm sure.
So don't blame them. But this year, they point out, by this year they mean 2009, that 100 more magazines went under than were started. So it's especially urgent. But the other part of the question is there a future for the mass market magazine? Did you answer that?
No, I didn't.
I didn't hear that.
Again, is there a future for the mass market magazine? I think there's a future for the New Yorker. I think it's going to be answered individually. Why is there a future for the New Yorker? Because with the expansion of media on the internet, is there more depth in what you read or less depth? No, there's more speed, there's more reach, there's more responsiveness, there's more conversation. But are there more Cy Hirsches? Are there more Jane Mayers? Are there more David Grands? Is there more narrative storytelling? No, there's not. There's, I think, arguably less, because the other places that have it, that support it, are either, as to use the business euphemism, challenged,
Right.
or are in danger of dying completely. So, on the other hand, I think people want what we do, Victor.
Okay.
I think they want what we do. The question is, how can we make it profitable so I don't have to wake up in the morning and think about business? How can I think about journalism and literature and poetry and all the rest of the things?
So that gets to my second question, also a business question coming
Sure.
from this PJs report, which is the experts in there answer your question the following way. They say there are 3 ways that you could make it work. One is to charge more.
I agree.
For your magazine. The second is to erect paywalls on the internet. And
Not
the
so
third
much.
is to stop the practice of offering subscriptions at a discount, technical thing. What do you think
Those are
of
the
those
same.
3 things?
Number 1 and number 3 are the same.
Well,
I think it's a weird thing, a strange thing, that this cup of coffee costs more than the New Yorker, if you subscribe, that you are reading while drinking it. So what you're getting in an issue of the New Yorker this week, for example, is one of the world's best photographers spending months going around the country photographing heroes of the civil rights movement, a piece by Susan Orlean, a piece by Jane Mayer, all kinds of cartoons, incredible care and editing, 4 different covers by some of the great graphic novel artists of our time, any number of things, versus the cup of coffee. The old model was, and the model to this day was, sell the magazine cheaply by subscriptions, jack up the circulation rate, and then say to the advertiser, look, we have 2 million readers, so you should pay us a lot of money for the ads. Now that formula worked for decades, more or less, depending on which magazine it was. Now that advertising has become, and again the euphemism in the business world, challenged or different or whatever it's going to be, one has to look at this formula with a steelier eye. And there's no doubt to me that the business of giving away, practically giving away a magazine to jack up circulation doesn't have a big future.
Right.
You can be sure that this conversation is being had every day. Okay. Now, in our case, we make a lot of money on circulation because we don't give it away. But I still think, you know, for example, the average, you get it for $42 a year. We publish 46 issues. I think you could pay more than $1 an issue. I really do.
Good. So do it. Free.
You know, I don't make these decisions alone.
Good. Got a scoop. News, you know. So this is the last existential question I'm going to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
But,
being in nothingness.
Also it comes from the report. Yeah. What constitutes a magazine? What is a magazine? Salon announced recently that it's no longer a magazine because
it's on the website.
Salon, which was the first web online magazine,
Yeah.
it called itself a magazine all these years, and it said a few weeks ago it's not a magazine anymore because it changes its content so frequently that it doesn't qualify as a magazine. It's something else. So what is a magazine?
Well,
can you have an online magazine?
Well, again, I think we're in the middle of the river here. We're not neither on one side, neither on one bank nor the other bank. What is the New Yorker at this point? Well, there's this thing that you get on Monday, on paper with ink and so on, and then there's this thing you get called NewYorker.com, which has, I won't give you the whole. I'll tell you quite frankly why. I don't want to give you the whole thing for free because I don't want to make the same mistake that newspapers made. I don't want to train 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, young people to think that this is without value, that it comes out of the machine the way water comes out of the sink practically for free. I think that's a very bad thing and leads toward a very, very bad economic future. So we've kind of not, you know, again, if we had all the answers pure and simple to this, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So we've had a compromise. We've given you part of it, and then as we've paid more and more attention to the website, we've generated, I hate this word, but content that's unique to the website. Now along comes these things called, if you'll forgive the expression, iPads or whatever they're going to be, and there'll be 100 of them between now and the next 10 years. They'll get better and better. And the idea there is to actually have a magazine with advertising.
Yes.
So that's another form. We're also on Kindle without advertising. It's a lousy deal, by the way. It's not a great deal between us and Amazon. And I don't think it's the best way to read it, but if people want to read the pieces that way, who am I to get in their way? We are in the middle of this thing, and it's clearly going to change and evolve, and nobody's going to have a kind of magic formula answer.
So there's no magic formula answer to what is a magazine either, is it?
I know what the New
Because we're in the
Yorker
middle.
is, and I think you know, that's my business.
You're anticipating a lot of the
Sure.
other subjects, but that's okay. So about 2 months ago, I had my first visit to the Condé Nast cafeteria, and you should all have such an experience. The prices are right, but lo and behold, there was Remnick sitting with Cy Newhouse. And the first question I asked the person I was with, I said, do they do this every day? They come here? And he said, no, this is a sighting. You're here for a momentous occasion. So my question is, what did you talk about?
No, we have lunch every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And we talk about what's in the magazine. We talk about just the things that we're talking about now in detail. We talk about personnel. We talk about politics.
Could you give us a little more concrete?
We don't talk about politics in the way I imagine that
Yeah.
you did at The Nation. We don't sit there and argue it out. And that, in fact, if you were to ask me about size politics, I wouldn't be able to answer. Not because I'm so damn discreet, because I just can't quite suss it out.
Right.
And I love that, because it's all in my hands with my colleagues. It really is. This goes to what we discussed.
You love that he doesn't tell you what to do when you talk about it. That
No. Not tell me what to do. He barely, he's very careful to even evince an interest ahead of time. I've told this story, and I hope I haven't told it to you, Victor, but
I forgot it. If you told
fair
it.
enough. Fair enough. I understand, my being the editor of this magazine is a freak thing. I had never been the editor of anything other than my high school newspaper.
My next question.
Okay.
So,
Sorry, Victor.
it's all right.
But
Got it.
so my experience I had two editors in my life, Ben Bradley at the Washington Post, where I was a pretty small peon, and Tina Brown at the New Yorker, which is a smaller place, so my contact with Tina was a great deal more. Okay. So not long after I was editor, Cy Hirsch had a investigative piece. And it was about a number of things, earth-shattering in various ways. The relationship between the Prime Minister of Russia and Saddam Hussein, for example, and money's exchange between the two, whatever. And I thought to myself, now, what did Ben Bradley do in that situation? He called Katharine Graham, and there was something called the no surprises rule. So I did that, and I called Cy Newhouse, and I explained what this story was going to be, and it was, by the way, way too late to stop the train.
Right.
And, or if we had stopped the train, it would have been a bit of a bother. And I said, and the checkers and the lawyers have gone over it, and I have great confidence in the piece, and so on and so forth. And there was a long pause at the other end of the phone. And he said, well, that sounds very interesting. I look forward to reading it. That was the first and the last time I made such a phone call. I got the message. The message was, why are you telling me? I hired you. I trust you. And, you know, if you cock it up, maybe that'll change. But that's the arrangement. That's fairly unique in publishing anywhere.
We have a no surprises rule at the journalism school and with CJR. And Nick says, just no surprises. Let me know.
I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, good, okay.
It's his cafeteria, after all.
Okay, okay. Is there anything more you want to say about the relationship of the magazine to the website other than you don't want people to devalue it by giving it away for free? Because
No,
you're giving away a third of it for free. So you're devaluating Talk of the Town or whatever it is.
It has shown, I think, if anything, first of all, we noticed that a very small percentage of the people that read us online subscribe to the magazine. Now, a lot of that is because they've been linked there for a particular story. They're coming through Google or Google News or whatever. And I think that that's a different kind of reader, and if I can get him or her to subscribe, fine. By the way, my interest in the web is a great deal deeper than that and more interesting than that.
Sure.
But I do think that the New Yorker should do first and foremost what it is good at, what is potentially what it's best at, and being almost comically brief or just snapping wise at some other thing, and that activity is so ubiquitous.
Right.
That I'm careful about that kind of thing overwhelming what we do on the website.
Okay. And you mentioned the iPad. Is the iPad causing you to reconsider anything about the way you do business, or are you going to adapt to it in some way, shape, or form, or is that going to change the advertising equation?
Well, we don't know yet. Honestly, it's not that we're not thinking about it. It's not that we're having endless meetings, some of them even not boring, but we don't know yet.
No.
But of course, the attractiveness of the iPad as opposed to the web is the potential for advertising to be more attractive to advertisers and therefore be more of a business proposition,
Right.
be more helpful.
Because I always thought that the problem with the conventional analysis of what's wrong with magazines is they say, well, advertising is migrating to the web. I say, okay, but the same companies that own, I know.
It's all migrating to Google, Yahoo, and it's
Right.
all to the,
Yes,
the amount of money that we make on web advertising and that is made in web advertising for magazines even roughly similar is minuscule.
Right, okay. But the conventional analysis, it's going there and then they charge less. And then so I say, well, that's good news because people understand that print is more valuable franchise and that's why they're charging less because it has less impact.
I don't think that's going to be the complete picture.
No. Okay, well, the iPod's supposed to change all that.
We'll see.
And that's what
we'll see.
Okay,
we'll see.
So I mentioned in the introduction, all of the things that you do there, and made a joke about how can one person do all those things. Could you just take us through a week, your week? You get up at what time? What newspapers do you read? You go into the office. How many meetings do you have? Do you have editorial meetings?
Sure.
If you go through cartoons with the cartoon editor, how does that work? Do you blue pencil edit manuscripts, or do you read them at night when you go home? How does your week shape up?
You're right about my family's patience, but I don't do much else. In other words, I don't have a life crowded by sitting on 16 outside committees and a bowling league and this, that, and the other hand. I read, I write once in a while. Some of this is made, it's true, the last year I wrote a book. But I hadn't written a book in 12 years. That's a fairly long time. And I get up very early and go to bed late, and I work a lot. It's very simple. If you keep at it, if you keep pushing a ball up the hill, by the end of the day, you've done something.
Well, but
And
give us a day. What's Monday like, you know?
Who the hell remembers Monday? I get up, take the book out of the equation. Let's take the book out. It's very normal. I get up fairly early. I may even exercise a little bit, have breakfast with my son. First of all, I have a complicated home life in the sense I have my third kid is autistic.
Yes.
And this is pretty consuming.
Yes.
As a result, our family life turned into more Ozzie and Harriet than we would have liked. My wife was a Times reporter for a long time, Esther Fine, and a lot of her time is taken up with Natasha. I have a son in college, and I have a middle son who's a junior in high school. And the two boys, thank God, are very capable and normal and great. And just, you know, it takes a lot of time. An autistic kid, I don't mean a little off, I mean
Sure.
quite severely so. So, I am blessed, Victor, in the sense that I may be neurotic in some regards, and maybe a lot of work is one of them. I think we probably share that. But I'm not, and one of the hardest things I had to figure out as an editor was empathy for writers who either don't like to write very much or have a hard time. They don't have this sort of, you know the word Sitzfleisch? Literally ass in the chair. They want to do anything but write. They want to have written, or they want to be on panels or speeches, but the actual, you know, Updikean ass in the chair at 7 in the morning and lunch and then more of it is less common than you would think. First of all, it's really hard. Mentally, it's hard. It's isolating. It's difficult. So I had to learn that. I've never had a problem with that. I like that. So, Victor, you know, the way I grew up, the idea that I'm doing the work that I'm doing, the work that I've been able to do since I'm 20 years old, is so preposterous to me and joyful and privileged that I can hardly wait to put my pants on in the morning. So I don't see this as a great, and I do put my pants on in the morning. It's very important at the New Yorker.
He does.
Very, very important. And so in a way, I understand your question, but and as far as meetings, of course, I do read everything. We don't.
So you go to the, but the question is.
I go to the office. We try not to go crazy with meetings.
Right.
The thing that's become a pain in the neck is that business meetings. Meetings with the publisher, meetings on the 11th floor with this executive or that, meetings about primo subscriptions as opposed to regular subscriptions, or all these kinds of things that were not as great a concern X number of years ago are consuming and not nearly as fascinating as dealing with the latest fiction or journalistic problems or editing. I edit now 3 writers. When you say blue penciling, in other words, they're immediately mine.
Right.
Alec Wilkinson, R. Levy, and Khalifa Sana. So just as first of all, it's fun.
Yeah.
As opposed to kind of getting the manuscript and then gnomically commenting to it through another editor. It's good, and 2 of the 3 are very young writers or youngish writers, and maybe I have something to say and maybe even can be helpful. Selecting, again, I'm surrounded by, I think more than at a smaller magazine, by enormously talented and capable and not junior people. People that you may or may not know, Dorothy Wickenden, Henry Finder, Daniel Zalewski, Pam McCarthy. I mean, they do an enormous amount of heavy lifting in all ways. So it's not like I imagine certain other magazines to be where the editor, well, look at Bob Silvers at the New York Review. He's amazing to me. Amazing. First of all, he's a man he's not young. He's been doing this job since he was young. He began the magazine with Barbara Epstein, and so far as I can see, does almost the whole damn thing himself with some kind of junior editorial support. Yes. You can call the office at 1 o'clock in the morning, because they have a general number, and he will say, New York Review of Books. So in a way, that's a question that valorizes Bob a hell of a lot more than me. I do a lot of reading at home and early in the morning and late at night. Because there's a lot of reading in a magazine. Yeah. You're reading things that are never going to make it. Right. You read halfway through a book, et cetera.
Do you have a meeting where you decide the sequence of articles, or how does that?
Sure, we publish a lot of things that take a long time to develop. We're not an opinion magazine where there's a lot of things that are off the news. The elements that are just right off the news in an issue of the New Yorker, it's usually comment, maybe something in talk, and if I can really get this Ferrari going, something like the Haitian earthquake or something like that. But the majority of and the arts in the back, a lot of it has to do with what movie or piece of theater or book or whatever. But the big, long pieces have been long in cooking. Before I came here, I just read a 30-odd thousand word piece by David Samuels, set in the Balkans, that is, I think he's been working on it for the better part of a year. And that's now got to go through editing. It will not run at 30,000 words. It's got to go through checking in other languages. I mean, it's going to take a while.
Right.
So these things are in development, and juggling those different kinds. One ball is a ping pong ball and one's a bowling ball.
Right.
And we have a long schedule where we think we know what's happening these next 4 weeks, but it's changing all the time because so-and-so didn't finish or this one suddenly seems timely. I think an issue of the magazine, ideally, has a piece that's like, say, David Grand's thing on the Lost City of Z, but the next piece is right off of something in the middle of the election. That's the kind of New Yorker that I like.
Do you have, I mean, in the old days, one would sit with the index cards on a cork board, and there would be the upcoming issue, the next issue, the next issue, the next issue, the next, and then you'd move them around.
No, they didn't move them around. I think that what Victor's referring to is a kind of the William Shawn period of the New Yorker, which lasted from the early 50s until the mid 80s. Now remember, the New Yorker, peaking in about 1966, was wallowing in ad pages. And in businesses that don't even exist anymore, in a world where there were far fewer options for those advertisers. And as a result, if you look at a New Yorker from 1966, for page after page after page, it'd be one thin strip of type with ads all around it. Those are called, in the business, adjacencies. So you had to churn out so much editorial matter, hence these 3- and 4-part series, some of which were books chopped up like a salami, some of which were sublime and wonderful, some maybe duller. The magazine has changed because there are economic reasons why these things happen. There's a sociology of these things, which you've described in your own work about opinion journalism. There's a sociology to these things. There's a history. Ideally, I want the magazine not to be the magazine you think you can put aside and then read all of it with profit 6 months later. I want there to be some elements of it that are incredibly vital to the moment, and then absolutely some things that could be read a year from now or more.
Right. But
it's a hard trick.
But if you don't keep them on a cork board...
Well, the cork board is now online.
It's on the computer.
That's
what I was going to ask you, is that you have in one place what next week's issue is going to be.
Oh, sure,
the week after that,
sure. And there's a constantly circulating thing called the long schedule, and it's highly changeable.
Okay. Just to go back to the web for a second, the New Yorker is famous for its fact-checking and its fastidious copy editing. Are those standards in other magazines? I can tell you, we've just done a CJR survey, and we haven't published it yet, on the relationship of magazines to their websites. And by and large, the fact-checking and copy editing, for example, on websites it's a second-class citizen compared to fact-checking and copy editing in the magazine. Is that true at the New Yorker?
I think that's fair to some degree. I think that it does get a look by a copy editor, but the amount of checking that goes into it's by the comparison of the rest of the magazine. Your point is well taken, Victor. And I think readers understand that too. That the part of the charm of the web is its speed.
Right.
And if you're going to spend that amount of time, you will have lost that advantage. So no, we cannot. If you're going to have a blog post and spend 3 days looking at it, first of all, the manpower is extraordinarily expensive, and second of all, you're not in the argument.
Right. Okay. Let me ask you a copy question. Our magazine workshop went down to the Nation last week, and we spoke to the copy editor down there. And one of the issues is what style book do you use to determine your magazine? And I told them the story. When I came to the Nation, they used to use the Chicago Manual of Style, and we changed it to the New York Times Manual of Style. And one of the results was the word theater, which in the Chicago Manual is spelled R-E, in the New York Times Manual is spelled E-R, and we changed it. And the next day, the former publisher of the Nation, the late James J. Starr, came in to me, and his face was all red, and he started pounding on the desk, and he told me that we were going to get 2,000 letters objecting to this change. We were lowering the standards of the magazine.
Did you get any letters?
And we got a couple of letters,
Yeah.
and that was it.
Yeah.
But and then I opened my New Yorker last week, and I noticed for the first time, theater is spelled R-E.
You bet.
So why? What's the difference?
You bet.
You know.
Well, Victor, it would just be wrong to change it.
Well,
You know,
I never claimed those.
we used to have more of these,
Right.
and every once in a while I'll wander into Ann Gold, she's the head of the copy department, and a kind of genius, I have to say, really extraordinary person. And I'll say, do we really have to still have, it's not even an umlaut, it's called diaeresis over coordinate? And she'll look at me as if I had dragged in a barrel of garbage and rotten food and dumped it into her office. And I'll just say, just asking, Ann. And I have to say, at a certain point, there's no doubt that it, like the Caslon type, or it's a feature of the magazine. When it looks ridiculous, you're duty bound to change it. I don't wake up thinking about these things. First of all, there aren't as many as there used to be.
Okay. Just 3 more.
We'd
on
get
my
a lot
list.
of letters, but I
Okay.
think they probably wouldn't be from many people in this room.
Good, okay.
I'm guessing.
I got 3 more, and then I invite you all. Sorry to take this time. I get a chance to ask them, so.
Did everybody get
taking
food?
advantage of this. They had
They're-
food up there.
So they're
When
fine.
they came
They're
in. but
fed,
If
they're
you want
warm.
one, we'll give you one too, you know.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. And no one left after eating, so this is a tribute to you.
That's a start.
So you said that you never could have imagined doing what you're doing, and you've said that your training for it was what I would describe as not training for it. Being a reporter for the Washington Post is great, and being a great reporter for the Washington Post is better. But what's your advice to people who they're not going to end up doing what you're doing? Most of them. There may be one of them out there who will. But what is the training to do what you do? And I know you can say you don't know because you just know what happened to you. But
No, I
you
know a
what
little
the
bit because
job
I
is
I
now,
hire
yeah.
people
Yeah.
and see. Look,
Right.
I just to be nutshell about it, my career is very simple. It's 10 years as a reporter at the Washington Post, the last 4 of which were in Moscow, a year off to write a book about Moscow called Lenin's Tomb, and I was hired by Tina Brown to go to the New Yorker, and I was a writer at that magazine for 5 years, and did a little kind of, I would call it editorial kibitzing, which is to say, you know, just irresponsible, I think, dragged into a meeting here or there. And then Tina left to edit another magazine, something called Talk Magazine, and there was no editor. And over an odd weekend, I was, after a flirtation with Michael Kinsley that didn't go well, who I would have worked for in a second, who I think the world of, they picked me. It's as simple and as weird as that. But I have no doubt if it hadn't worked out,
But I'm not asking.
I'd be back at second base.
I'm not asking how you got it. I'm asking what kind of preparation. What kind of preparation?
I think most
do
of
you
the staff,
recommend for someone who might end up with it, however it happened.
Unfortunately, I think in many ways my experience is so irrelevant to most of the people in this room because of remember the Washington Post that I joined, which was already an amazing thing. In 1981-2 was, if not at the zenith of its close to it. All these concerns that you're thinking about today, these questions that we began our conversation with, it would have been considered almost not on to discuss it in a journalism forum, almost kind of déclassé, or, we leave that to the ad people. Now it's at the center of everybody's concern because of what you described as an existential notion. All that said, I will say this, that unless, I love that sound, unless the American Republic is deciding to close its doors and become something much reduced, that there has got to be a place, and I know that there is a place, for the best of what journalism is. Just think sociologically about the country. There are not fewer groups and ethnicities who now have access to real and the best educations in the country. There are more.
Yes.
Look at this room. Look at Columbia University. Without getting romantic or teary-eyed about it, this is a very different place than it was 40 years ago. There are just many more kinds of people and greater numbers of people who demand depth, even irreverence, seriousness, humor, at the best of what journalism can do. So the idea that because of this economic situation that we're in, or the idea that because of the technological revolution that we're in, that we're no longer going to have journalism like the New York Times at its best, or the New Yorker at its best, or any number that you can name, to me, I think is not on. It's not true.
Right. Okay.
That in some sense the market will demand it. Now, how it's going to be delivered, and that obviously is the question.
You know, in the
I just think a country that doesn't have, and I know we live inside the weather of somewhat of the New York Times because we read it so carefully, but the lack of something like that would be catastrophic. I can't think of a more important private institution in the country.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In the report that I mentioned earlier, they list a category of what they call news magazines. They list the category of what they call news magazines. And they list Newsweek, they list Time, they list The Economist, and they list The Week, and they list The New Yorker. Now, in my sort of stereotypical view of The New Yorker, it's been through a number of stages. It had Harold Ross when it was this kind of smart magazine around town, and it had William Shawn where they ran the pieces you were talking about, these distinguished longer pieces. They had Bob Gottlieb, who was this transitional figure and wasn't there really long enough to make his mark, although he brought them into the next period. They had Tina, where it was known for its glitz, and now they have you. Do you accept this category of being a news weekly?
No, because we'd be a terrible news weekly.
Okay, so
we're not. That's not what we do.
Okay, so you're not a news magazine. You're not.
It's a pretty.
So what are you?
It's a pretty sui generis thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's pretty much of itself.
Yes.
And the great advantage of being an editor of the New Yorker is that you have the template provided by this very strange genius from 1925, Harold Ross, who was a Western newspaper man, whose experience was at Stars and Stripes and in Nevada and so on. And he came up with this weird template. And it was very much a figment of the Roaring '20s, and very Manhattan, and a Manhattan of a certain kind. Now we're a national magazine, but the template more or less was there, and it got added onto with time. That is a fantastic advantage for any editor. That, in other words, I would not want to be in John Meacham or Rick Stengel's shoes. These are the editors of Newsweek and Time. Why? Because the original template, they have a genre problem. In other words, what is a newsweekly has been under question now for 20-odd years, and now it's even more so because of the speed of the internet.
Okay. So I want to ask you a final question, and I invite all of you now to join this conversation. That is, I saw you on Morning Joe last week, and you were having a talk, and the issue of the Congress came up, and majority rule, and you talked about Rick Hertzberg's allegiance to the idea of proportional representation, which he has been pushing for a long time. It's a very funny conversation, and
I don't think he knew what I was banging on about, but yeah.
Pardon? No, but what was interesting to me about it was, I happen to agree with him, and was that you seemed to endorse his view of it. That may be wrong, but it led me to the question of, which I think I know the answer to, but I think I know your answer to, and I think I may not agree with it, but the question is, does the New Yorker have a politics?
This is what we started out talking about the last time, and I think
and I know it's different from not Democrat versus Republican.
I know.
And you don't have an editorial thing, or do you endorsing candidates the way the Nation does, and you do this time. So now
we do in the last since Kerry Bush.
Okay.
I thought it was disingenuous that we didn't endorse anybody. In other words, I would certainly publish conservatives, and we have.
Sure.
I would not make a right-winger our comment writer. And I think, generally speaking, our magazine is a liberal magazine. We are not, though, an opinion magazine a la Nation, New Republic, and ranging all the way to the right. We're just not.
Right.
It's not what we do, and it's not what we do best. On the other hand, that part which is devoted to opinion, I'm very mindful of, and frankly, I don't want it to be a right-wing magazine. I just don't.
Right. Good. All right. All yours. Microphone, please. If you want to ask a question, get to the mic, because we're recording this, and...
I have 6 questions, but I'll ask only I'll make it easy and ask only 3. First, are you a fast reader? Second, what else do you read beside the New Yorker in the way of publications?
Yeah.
And third, the covers.
Yeah.
I've been looking at them for 75 years and understanding them for 65 until the one called Siberia. Has there been a shift? That's the one of the statue and the cow. I just didn't get it. Has there been a shift in the philosophy of covers? And did I miss it, or what?
Was that 6?
That's 3.
No, it was 3.
That's 3.
Well, I think with covers and cartoons, there's always, it would be a very bad week if I didn't get at least one letter or one now email. Letters are very rare now on paper, where somebody said I didn't get it. And it's gotten to be so common that we now, in the cartoon issue, which we do annually, because we're lazy, we're going to just fill it up with cartoons, where we have a feature called I Don't Get It, in which we eliminate, we basically ask, we have joke captions, because at a certain point we don't get it either. I do have the phenomenon, sitting down with Bob Mankoff, where I'll choose cartoons with him, it'll run, and 3 weeks later I'll have no idea what I was thinking. So I've now instituted a system. I have 2 very young, there's a managing editor and what's called an A-issue editor. They're both quite young, very, very smart. And they now have a system where they'll write really like on the Saturday Night Live gag. I'll buy, say, 20 cartoons, and Sylvia Killingsworth will write on 1 or 2 of them, really? Meaning, David, are you kidding? Are you sure you want to buy this one? And it'll give me a chance to concentrate. Because if you're a magazine editor and you're putting together an issue every week, you're making a lot of decisions kind of quickly all day long. And some have great consequence, some can be about a caption. But you know, there's a certain element of the benevolent dictator to this. And if you're a stupid one, you stick by your so-called convictions and never change your mind. So as for the covers, oh, you get them. You do. I know you do. That was just a little bit of surrealism from Komar and Melamed.
And are you a speed reader?
You know, I'm a speed reader when I'm reading it in a certain way, and I'm a very slow reader when I'm reading in a certain way. If I'm reading a book manuscript that has a chance at maybe us looking for an excerpt, I can't afford to read slowly. I have to read fairly ruthlessly. But if I'm reading something of great subtlety or beauty or Cy Hirsch, and I need to ask a lot of questions or any investigative piece, I read very slowly and carefully. I'm not particularly fast,
And
no.
his third question, what else do you read?
Oh, I read tons and tons of all kinds of things, high and low. I mean,
Tons. Good. Okay.
you know, websites, magazines, books.
Good. Other questions? Why don't you just, Sanal, yeah.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about the role of photography, both artistic and photojournalism, in the New Yorker and generally in magazines now, and also if the internet provides a place, you know, for photography that there isn't space for anymore?
Well, I think the internet is a fantastic thing for us in terms of photography, because when you're doing the magazine on paper, your choices are limited. So usually you run, remember, the New Yorker didn't have any photographs whatsoever until the early 90s. And now we do. But even so, space is the great finite commodity on a paper magazine, and you make a choice, and it's 1 or 2 at best. What happens if someone's gone to Afghanistan or Los Angeles, wherever it is, and has taken an extraordinary series of photographs, and you'd like your reader to see that. Well, the great outlet for that is on the web in terms of slideshows, and if that can be worked out between the photographer and the magazine, we try to do it as often as possible. So I think that's a wonderful new possibility, that one of many that the internet provides, a magazine, if we want to call it that.
Good. Yeah.
At a time when ad budgets are down and editorial pages are limited, they're at a premium, why does the New Yorker still publish poetry? And are there arguments about publishing it?
There are none whatsoever. I'll tell you why. I'll answer the poetry question. If you had something else, you can add it. But I'm not that stupid. In other words, I operate under the understanding that the first thing that people read in the New Yorker is the cartoons. That's the case for 98% of the people say that, and the other 2% are lying. Why not? I mean, what is the great deficit that we have in our day-to-day lives? Humor, a laugh, a relief. I mean, life is hard all the time. Even if you're really lucky, it's hard. And humor in that form is very quick. I'm not under any illusion that every single one of our million subscribers or 3 million readers reads every word of, say, a 14,000-word report from some war zone. But those who do read it, and I think there are a lot more than you might think, are affected by it gratefully, and I would say the same about fiction and poetry. I'm under no illusion that every single one of our readers is a John Ashbery fan. But those who read it are probably not innate poetry readers, they're not buying books of poetry, and they're probably not getting the American Poetry Review or Literary Quarterlies. But the idea to me that they read a Mary Oliver poem or Derek Walcott, whoever it might be, and are somehow affected by it in a way that journalism just can't do is thrilling. Thrilling.
Good. Did you have a follow-up, or?
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
What is the culture, though, within the office of poetry, and what did the editors
How is it
talk
selected?
about it?
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and did the editors talk about it? What's sort of the atmosphere of poetry within the office?
I don't think there's a poetic atmosphere in the office. We have a poetry editor who's extraordinary, named Paul Muldoon, who himself is one of the great poets in the English language. He's Irish, teaches at Princeton, and he has an assistant. We get tons and tons of poems, and we can only do 2 a week. And so he finally gives me what he's selected, and for the most part, we just go ahead with that. He's there to be smart about that. And who am I to get in Paul Muldoon's way? Once in a while, I'll say, like you did, I don't get it. And it may still go in, or I'm not wild about this, and we'll talk about it. But it's pretty much like the covers, a conversation between two people. It's Paul Muldoon selecting. With covers, it's Francois Mouly, who's been at the magazine for quite some time, and I think a really extraordinary editor.
Good. Yes.
What impact do you think that very immediate social media like blogs and Twitter have had on the long-scale reporting that you mentioned, like the 14,000-word piece from Afghanistan? What impact do you think those very immediate things have had on that type of story?
I think ideally something like Twitter alerts people that they read it and you should read it too, and here's one of the, what are they called, tiny URLs? That's great. I have no, why would I have any problem with that whatsoever? I think that's what's wonderful. It's a kind of, poke in the ribs electronically in your community. I've read this thing. You don't hesitate. Make sure you read it, and here it is. That's great.
Does the New Yorker have like a Twitter strategy or a blogger strategy?
We have. I don't think we're as blogger rich as something like the Atlantic. We're at the Atlantic. Probably the star at the moment of the magazine is their main blogger, Andrew Sullivan. We have people who post fairly regularly, Hertzberg, Packer, a number of people. Amy Davidson now has a very good blog. But I still don't think that that's the overwhelming emphasis. Remember, what is it that the New Yorker does arguably best? Is it blogging? Is it one-paragraph long things? No, I think the world is pretty full of that. And some of it's great, and some of it's not great, and we wouldn't know as much about Iran, for example, if it weren't for these, for these new technologies. It's wonderful. But it's not what we do best. And you have to, when you're doing something like this, you have to say to yourself, are we just doing this to be like all the other kids, or are we doing it because we can do it exceptionally well?
Good. Yeah, I think there was a woman who got up there first and then sat down.
That's right.
No. I just want to. Good.
I think I was that woman. big, tall woman. I took. I'm not a woman, by the way. My name's Fred. I took John Bennett's profile writing class last semester. A great class. We read heavily from Life Stories, the book you helped edit of profiles from the New Yorker, and I got interested in the role of a subject's parents in the stories that were then told about them. And my question for you was your opinion on, is it possible to present a 360-degree view of someone without mentioning their parents?
I don't think it's possible to present a 360-degree view at all of anyone, ever. I mean, George Eliot can barely do it. Why should you be able to accomplish? I mean, we're talking on the deepest sense. I mean, imagine for a second what a person is. The interior life, the life day to day, the uniqueness of that person's vision or foolishness or accomplishments, his or her passions, sex life, family, you know, all these people are pretty goddamn complicated. So a profile can't pretend to be what you're describing, which is completist. It has to have a point of view. It has to leave things out, right? It can't be like one of those nutty diarists who come along every 25 years who write down every word they think of in their minds, and like Joe Gould or something like that. So you ask about parents in profile writing. It depends. I'm not sure that if I'm reading a profile of Richard Holbrooke that I care that much about his parents. Because what do we care about Richard Holbrooke for? We care about Afghanistan and Pakistan and his impact on politics and him as a bureaucratic player and so on. On a different kind of subject, that may be quite different. A certain kind of psychologist. And it also depends on how much the subject lets you in or not. So this is the worst kind of answer. It depends.
You know, the great ethnologist Irving Goffman once said, I was talking to him about the possibility of doing a book about someone, and he said to me, you don't want to do that. And I said, why not? And he said, well, you can't tell everything about them because it's impossible, that life is, and, but if you push and invade their lives, you're violating their right of privacy. So it's a illegitimate form. And I said, well, are you saying, you know, Eric Erickson and all that are second-rate intellects? And he said, yeah, I'd say that. So
I'm not there yet.
Is. No,
I'm not there yet. Look, you mentioned this book about Obama. I got up even earlier and went to bed even later and took lots of weekends and some trips here and there and tried to write a book about Obama's life and how it intersects with racial issues and racial history in the United States. And I don't pretend for a second that this is what you describe as 360 degrees. It's just impossible.
Good.
Even in somebody as overexposed as that, you're never going to know everything.
Right.
I was that woman. I'm not this tall. Okay. I was interested in what you said about the photography and the bloggings. What's going on with the video on the New Yorker website? You do everything so exceptionally well, except for the video. So why do it at all?
Well, it's getting better. I would, because we don't have. It's very simple. Money, resources, time, personnel. So, do we want to spend the money it would require to get 6 people doing this at the highest level and be okay at it, or do I want to spend it on a superb writer or 3 or whatever and be the best at covering the war in Afghanistan or the utterly uncovered city of Washington, D.C. in so many ways, or da-da-da. Those are the choices one makes. An editor doesn't have limitless resources, even with the generosity of Cy Newhouse and patience, nor does he or she have endless space. You cannot do everything. You have to choose. It's part of what being an editor is about, is choosing this, not that. There's no doubt that the New York Times does some extraordinary video work now. Is it as good as the video work that we see on television? I don't know. I don't know. This week we have this civil rights thing. Go on and see what the video looks like to you. It's fairly elegant and basic and inexpensively done, but I think it meets its need. But we have the amount of resources devoted to video at this point are modest.
Can I ask how big your staff is?
We have freelancers that come in and out, so I really couldn't even say. We have one person that's there all the time that does video, and then people who help her, and it's. But you can rest assured it is less than Paramount Pictures. It's small.
As a Pulitzer Prize winner, do you accept the conventional wisdom, certainly in this building, that the National Enquirer, A, is not a weekly newspaper, and B, doesn't deserve to be considered for a prize for the Edwards expose?
Thanks a lot. You know, no, I don't. I don't. And maybe it may even have less to do with the publication itself than the story. I'm not a, ridiculous prude about all this. I just,
Why don't we go
is
there and
that
then
the
here?
great achievement of journalism? I don't know.
Great. Yeah.
No.
Let come to the mic if you want to ask a question. Get the mic, because otherwise they can't hear you when
He wants me to elaborate on it. I haven't thought it through completely. Is that terrible to say in a panel? The partial I don't know.
Good.
I'm among the 2%.
Because you could certainly argue that knowing that about John Edwards colors your notion of who John Edwards is and his character and the rest. So I understand the argument. I think I'm allowed to say I'm not absolutely sure on this one. And the National Enquirer's history is the National Enquirer's history. I mean, but they were very aggressive on this story, and they were right. And I don't think it's just a matter of being, just as a clock is right, that, a monkey can be right and say it's 12 o'clock twice a day and all that stuff. I don't know. I really don't know. And by the way, about prizes, it's nice of you to mention and so on, and your 6th grade teacher calls. This is not the most important thing in the world.
Good.
I'm among the 2% who doesn't read the cartoons first.
Okay.
I read the Anthony Lane movie reviews first.
Okay.
And I don't really have a question.
But Anthony Lane is, above all, funny.
Yes, indeed. And very insightful as well. So I actually don't really have a question. I just want his job in 40 years. And
In 40 years? He's not that young.
Good. Thank you.
And I won't be around.
Yeah.
To return to profile writing, it seems to me that a lot of your most celebrated pieces have been kind of biographical pieces of folks.
Mine or the magazines?
I think yours in particular, of people who are not necessarily very lovable. I'm thinking of Mike Tyson or.
You don't find Mike Tyson lovable?
Not particularly, but I'm wondering if those just
I
kind
think
of.
Mike Tyson is tragic.
Well, I think that's what makes them so interesting, is that you bring out the complexity of their characters, and I'm wondering if that was a conscious kind of thought process beforehand that drew you to them, or if it just worked out, or how you were able to kind of come to profile those particular people.
Well, I guess, I mean, Victor was very polite. The truth is that my interests and what I've written about are all over the place. Really all over the place. It's kind of a mess. And the one sort of steady thing that I've written a lot about of a serious-minded thing also happened by accident, which happens to be Russia. It's not as if I were a Russian studies major and then a graduate student and so on. My worst subject at college was Russian language, by far. So therefore, I made my living at it. It's all very strange. But But I would say that most of those profiles tend to be of people who are known, which is, for a lot of New Yorker writers, anathema. Joe Mitchell would sooner shoot himself in the foot than write a profile of somebody you've ever heard of. And a lot of our writers to this day are like that, whether it's Susan Orlean or Mark Singer or some of the other kind of masters of this form. And writing about politicians in particular, writing about people who are known, is a special challenge because they've been through it before. And what you want from them is so much different and deeper and more time-consuming than they're used to, that they buck up against it. Politicians, athletes are becoming the worst, with the exception of boxers. By the way, I don't love boxing. Muhammad Ali was really what got me into that game. I think it's probably morally indefensible.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if you can think of an example where you passed on a story, it didn't make the magazine, and you regretted it later. You thought it was a story that
we
got away.
passed on a story?
Yeah.
Well, in an investigative sense?
Yeah, investigative, or just something that ended up, you think about today, you regret.
Well, God, I mean, in the last 10 years, the investigative story that really was not gotten, although people got at the edges of it at Knight Ridder and a couple of other places, was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That story, had it been gotten on time, conclusively would have changed, well, almost everything. And Cy Hirsch didn't get that. Bob Woodward didn't get that. Younger reporters at other places who were admirable and aggressive. There were features of that story that made that extremely hard to get. There were people that said it, and they turned out to be right, but in terms of it being an investigative job that was done in anything like a conclusive way, of course I would have. And I could name 50 things like that.
But that's an example where journalism as a whole failed. I'm thinking, is there an example where you recall that you chose not to run a story, or it didn't make the cut, that maybe you regret?
I'm sure that's the case. But I can't, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon I'll call you, or 3 o'clock. But I'm sure that's the case, and it's a good question.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, one of my favorite pieces recently in the past year or so was the one about...
Well, you know what I passed on recently that was... I bet you I could have I bet you I could have found a way, and I passed on it too quickly. Jonathan Safran's Forest thing on meat. I read that book very quickly. Deborah Treisman and I read that book very quickly, and it's not something we've done enough of. I wouldn't mind having that pitch back again.
Okay. On that note, I was just wondering if you could talk about the experience with the story on the Texas death penalty story. I thought that was amazing, just how that was developed and where's that going to go? Because obviously it's a very...
Should I explain what he's talking about? Maybe you know, some you don't. David Gran wrote a piece set in a small town in Texas, which a guy was accused of and convicted of setting his own house on fire, in which people died, including his own children. And he was not only convicted, he was executed. And David went back and did a job that I think probably took him 6-7 months. And we're talking about economics. The economics of one person spending 6 or 7 months on one article is, at a commercial magazine, remember this is a commercial magazine as opposed to some others, is a big amount of time. And he basically discovered that he had been executed wrongly, and we're not guessing here, that this forensic evidence is overwhelming that he was killed by the state wrongly. That doesn't happen all the time. Now, the state of Texas and the way they've reacted to it politically is another matter. They seem determined to have this, shove this out of view as quickly as possible. But I don't think this piece is going to let them. And ideally, this is the kind of thing that journalism is capable of doing, whether it's Ida Tarbell on lynching or Cy Hirsch on My Lai and Abu Ghraib or any number of things. This is why when it comes down to it, I'm a crazy idealist about journalism. That without it, we are sunk. I don't mean the funny pages, and I don't mean the sports scores, but I mean a lot of different varieties of journalism. Without it, at its best, we are in deep trouble.
On that Texas subject, there's an example that cried out for follow-up. How do you view that when you do an investigatory piece that really is outstanding, such as that Texas piece? Do you feel obliged to do some sort of follow-up?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So in the example of Abu Ghraib, Cy Hirsch had two big elements in the first piece. He had photographs, and he had something called the Taguba Report, who was a general who turned out to be extremely right-minded and had a lot of integrity, and that report ended up in Cy's hands. So you had the confluence of these two elements. CBS had been very slow to publish or air what it had. They found out that we had it. They went on the air. We published the next day, et cetera. And all hell broke loose. And when all hell breaks loose, very often, that loosens up other sources, other pieces of information, other important things. And Cy has the nimbleness and aggressiveness, no small thing, to keep at it. Sometimes, as in the case of the Texas piece, first of all, the piece is, I don't know how long it was, 15,000, 16,000 words long, that the follow-up is in the hands of the Dallas Morning News or local television. In other words, the ground has been so churned up that the follow-up is going to be political ramifications and aggressive local political coverage. So it can go either way. Again, the New Yorker can't do everything all the time, otherwise we do nothing. So sometimes you do in the first way, and sometimes. Cy wrote 3 weeks in a row. I didn't expect that to be the case. It's just that's how it worked out.
I had a question about the long form and the way that you said people take 6 months, sometimes a year on articles, and to balance that when you get a pitch. You know, how do you work out when someone says, "I'm going to go check this out. Trust me, there's a story," versus someone saying, "Look, I know."
Depends who's saying it.
Well, then how do you balance
We have
that?
a considerable size staff. And so there are people that I have some sense of what they do and do well and how much to invest in and what they're better at and all those kinds of things. So, in other words, if I take if David Grand comes to me and sort of lays it out, or in another realm, Jane Mayer does and lays it out and says, I need X time, I'm very, very likely to give it to them. If someone I never heard of over the transom says I need to go to 16 countries and it's going to take me 6 months and you have to underwrite it all, I'm going to ask more questions. I have to.
Do you ever have the concern that even the most trusted names will come back saying it just
Oh,
wasn't a
absolutely.
story?
I think some of the price of investigative journalism is dry holes, and if you're not willing to drill some dry holes, you're not going to drill anything.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Why don't we take a last question here? Great.
So I have a question about what you consider to be good or quality. So, you know, let's say you get a bunch of pitches and amazing stories and all of that. Is there a certain sensibility or a common thread that you look for?
No. It can't possibly be, because how can you compare the sensibility to Anthony Lane to Seymour? I mean, they can barely be in the same room as personalities. Not that they hate each other, but they're just stunningly different people. That's part of what a magazine means, is the kind of joining of these things, this sort of market or common stage for these kind of performers, singers, writers to appear on. No, something we haven't talked about, we've been very sort of heavy journalism concentrated on the magazine. The magazine also has to be funny, and it also has to have some heart. If I look back, the one good exercise of the National Magazine Awards is we sit back and we assess what we did over the year, and did we have enough of this? Did we have enough heart as opposed to mind, as opposed to investigation? And that's a kind of salubrious moment. And so I want, over the course of the year, that essay writing also, which is very hard to define, is coming through.
So
That, as it were, what Joan Didion is doing in her essays as a young woman has a place in the magazine, in the same way that harder-nosed digging has a place, in the same way that David Sedaris can live side by side with not only Susan Orlean, but with John Lee Anderson.
So when you, I guess maybe what I'm asking is when you put all these pieces together and you're trying to build something that has, you know, a very complex sensibility or presentation to its audience.
Yeah.
What is that? I mean, I guess how would you define the magazine?
Well, as non-bland, as non-homogeneous. In other words, there's certain kinds of, the party's over. That there are certain kinds of restaurants in the world, like Chili's or something, and if you go to Chili's in Bangkok, you know what you're going to get. You know what the menu's going to be, and it's going to be reliably the same thing as when you ate at Chili's in Dallas or in Singapore. And then there's a kind of restaurant where you kind of wander in and mom and pop come out and they say, here's what you're going to eat, and it's going to be great, and just, you know, just trust us. We're more like that, only we're a little larger scale. In other words, you don't know what the hell you're going to get on a given week. An issue of the New Yorker may be heavily weighted toward, in a given week, politics. It may be heavily weighted toward the funny. We might bring the funny that week in a heavier proportion. So we're asking the reader to trust us, whereas The Economist, which I think in many ways is a brilliant magazine, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get a picture of the whole world in that week. You're going to get something from Africa reliably, you're going to get something from Southeast Asia, and you're going to get the whole panopticon. That's precisely what you're not going to get in the New Yorker. You're going to go deep and strange and in all different directions.
Well, thank you for giving us a picture of the New Yorker.
All right, thanks a lot. Thank you, Victor.
David. That's great.
Enjoy the snow, which seems to have increased steadily. Jeez.
Thank you.